I'm delighted to be here, and I'm grateful to Craig for inviting me to come back. It's a real pleasure to see you all again. Let's begin with prayer. All merciful God, we gather in your presence to explore the history of this beloved community. Help us to understand how the ups and downs, the ins and outs, have brought us to this very place. Give us the opportunity to see you more clearly. Endow us with a generous patience with the past and a vivid imagination for what awaits us, that we may enjoy your company here and always, with Christ your Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
I've decided to read this because I'm afraid that if I didn't read from what I've got written down, I wouldn't know when it's over. So I'll do my best to keep it interesting and so on. I understand we have questions and answers in chat after I'm finished. Is that right? Okay, great. Take a look at page 19 in your book. We're going to be going back and forth between the book and my chatter. I'm glad to see you have the books. I think we still have about 800 somewhere. So the first service at St. John's was a service of evensong on January 9th, 1881, following Sunday school. There were 21 enrolled scholars in the school and 4 teachers, with 4 choir boys and 54 people representing 15 families. The service was held at Dayton Avenue Presbyterian Church, just a few blocks from here that way, and they probably used 1789 Book of Common Prayer. The plate offering of $5 went to pay the Presbyterians for the use of their building. The Reverend Henry Kitson was the first rector. In the beginning, a small frame church served the congregation, but later there were 2 extensions to the church as the congregation continued to grow. Take a look at page 23. Mr. Kitson asked to lease from the parish the northerly portion of the church's lot on McCubbin to erect there at his own expense a stone schoolhouse, which would be used for the Sunday school and for social and other purposes. Page 27. In time, Mr. Kitson left St. John's and was replaced by Eleutheros J. Cook, and everybody called him Jay, as you can imagine. Mr. Cook was called to the rectorship when the congregation was weak and struggling, and he earnestly worked to build up and strengthen the parish. He was given a 2-month leave of absence for health reasons, and he and his family moved to the Boston area. 4 months later, Cook submitted his resignation, effective immediately, which the vestry accepted on the spot. In their response to him, the vestry conveyed their impression of appreciation for his services, but deplored, quote, the circumstances necessitating his withdrawal from the rectorship. The archives provide no other information about this parting of ways. In 1885, with the congregation growing steadily, the vestry decided that the frame church was no longer adequate. At a parish meeting in 1886, 22 men and a number of ladies with them expressed support for the vestry's decision to enlarge the church and congratulated them, quote, upon the future which we believe awaits this parish, and we hereby pledge to them our continued interest and hearty cooperation. Take a look at page 101. Probably in 1885, the Parish Aid Society for Women began as a sewing circle. As there was no guild room at the time, the women met at residences of the members over afternoon tea. Originally, the society raised funds for modest purposes, such as a quartet choir. See page 33. The third rector was John Hazen White. He was a man of energy and progress, a scholar, a liberal churchman, but somewhat strict as a constructionist of church law, of which he was an authority. He inherited an annual budget that was in the black by nearly $1,000. After about 3 years following the enlargement of the church, the east side of the building was widened to accommodate an additional 100 people. At about the same time, the vestry began searching for a site to build a new church. It was the sense of this vestry that the present site of the parish buildings is not the proper one for the permanent buildings of the parish. Mr. White told the vestry that the trustees of Seabury Divinity School in Faribault have called him to the wardenship of that institution, the only Episcopal divinity school west of the Mississippi River. The vitality and fiscal stability of the parish blossomed during White's rectorship. Numerous disbursements went to poor and charitable work, namely St. Paul Bethel, city missions, diocesan missions, domestic missions, foreign missions, aged and infirm clergy, Seabury Mission, Sheltering Arms Orphanage, St. Luke's Hospital, the Bishop's Special Needs, and the Home of the Friendless. In 1891, after only 2 years at St. John's, the rector John White said of his call to Seabury that except for the happiness and pleasure he found in his present relations, he had been, quote, able to find no ground upon which to base a declination of his call to Seabury, end of quote. The vestry acknowledged the importance and urgency of his call to Seabury. Page 42. In 1892, after considering 2 candidates for the open 4th rectorship, the vestry offered the post to the Reverend Yableton Peyton Morgan, Dean of Trinity Cathedral in Cleveland, Ohio, for a salary of $4,000. One of his first moves was to hire rising musicians, Emil Oberhofer, as choir master and organist. Oberhofer was the founder of what is now the Minnesota Orchestra. Mr. Morgan told the vestry that he had received calls from 2 major churches in the South. At the cathedral in New Orleans, which he described as among the most important parishes in the country, Morgan wrote that he would be relieved of all anxiety and labor regarding the building of a church in New Orleans and all the troubles of debts and subscriptions. The compensation would include a large and beautiful rectory, combining the comforts of the South and conveniences of the North, placed at his disposal free of rent, with the care of the grounds provided by the parish. In the meantime, the men on the church site committee reported that they were considering 2 possible sites for purchase. The first included 2 lots, and the other was on the southwest corner of Portland and McCubbin. The committee unqualifiedly recommended the 2 lots on Summit Avenue, valued at $38,000. The vestry authorized the committee to purchase the 2 lots on Summit Avenue at a price not to exceed $36,000. There was consternation among the vestry on this subject, and several men resigned their positions in protest. At a special parish meeting in 1892, a Ways and Means Committee was formed to seek subscriptions from the congregation. The men later reported that reasonable progress had been made, quote, but as there was no definite plan agreed upon as to the amount of money to be raised or the building to be erected, and as the work of obtaining subscriptions was interrupted by the advent of warm weather and absence from the city of many members of the committees, as well as a number of persons upon whom it was desirable to call, the efforts of the committee were temporarily suspended. See page 46. Perhaps frustrated by the slow pace of fundraising and eager to see St. John situated on Summit Avenue, parishioner Charles W. Bunn purchased a portion of the lot on Summit Avenue for the benefit of himself and certain others who advanced the money, with the understanding that the church would eventually repay them the money they expended, plus interest. Word of the deal appeared in the church press. It read, quote, the vestry of St. John's Parish in St. Paul have secured a location for their new church on Summit Avenue at the corner of Summit Court. They are to pay $33,000 for it, $41,100 of which has been paid. On September 15th, Mr. Morgan informed the vestry by letter that he had received a unanimous call as rector of Christ Church, Houston, which is now the cathedral. He wrote, the call has come unsought and unexpected, and is of so great importance that it demands careful consideration, end of quote. This was after a rectorship of only 7 months. But on the next day, the rector offered the vestry a resolution stating that whereas the wardens and vestry, quote, did of their own free will secure for the parish the lot on the corner of Summit Avenue and Summit Court for the purpose of erecting thereon a church and parish buildings, and whereas the Committee of Ways and Means has been successful in securing 1/3 of the amount proposed to raise, notwithstanding the rumor of discontent and opposition that has been circulated through the parish and city, be it therefore resolved that we wardens and vestry of St. John's Parish approve and reaffirm our own action, and hereby express the confident conviction that the amount of $100,000 will be subscribed by April 1st, 1893, and that the work of construction will then be commenced. The vestry deferred action on the resolution, and 3 days later, vestryman Emerson Pete moved that they be adopted. But there was no second to his motion. Instead, action was deferred until the Ways and Means Committee could report on its success with the names given to it for personal solicitation. There were then no reported vestry missions, but the vestry nevertheless devised a plan for raising a definite amount to pay for the lot and erect a church building with a guild house. A letter describing these details was sent to each family in the parish 2 days after Christmas, on December 27, 1892. On January 21st, 1893, Committee Chairman Emerson W. Pete sent an impassioned letter to the members of his committee asking that a canvass be organized to secure the necessary subscriptions, continuing until every person on his list has been induced to subscribe or has positively refused. Page 44. Owing to lacunae in the vestry records, it is difficult to reconstruct some of the negotiations and diplomacy that went on in the interim period. But fundraising continued for a new church, and by February 1893, subscriptions for the project were at $30,600, including a conditional subscription of $10,000 from Mr. David Chauncey Shepherd. A building committee of 5 was appointed to secure plans and specifications. Page 46. At its meeting on June 15th, the vestry adopted a contract stating that the parish debt to Charles Bunn in the amount of $16,800 plus interest, which he had paid toward the purchase of land on Summit Avenue, would be paid to him by St. John's on or before June 1st, 1894. The vestry decided with regret that the present income of the parish and the struggles of the building campaign made it expedient also to raise the amount of money necessary to pay for the rental of a rectory. In the end, Mr. Morgan decided not to move to New Orleans, provided the vestry would build a church, a guild house, and a rectory on Summit Avenue. On December 5th, the women of the parish formed St. John's Guild to secure $100 each by June 1894. The country was weathering the worst economic depression in the United States to date. Railroad overbuilding and shaky railroad financing had fueled the panic of 1893 that caused 600 banks and 15,000 businesses to fail. Take a look at page 48. At a parish meeting on June 5th, 1894, Emerson Peet reported that the parish had before it a tangible plan for the immediate construction of a temporary church and guild house, and that action should be taken, or the idea given up and the subscribers to the fund notified. Instead, architect Cass Gilbert presented to the congregation sketches of a proposed temporary building with estimates of the cost of construction, indicating that the plan now proposed contemplated building as much of the permanent church as the money would permit. That the part to be built immediately would seat about 625 people, and that the proposed plan would necessitate the least possible temporary work, but would be practically all availed of when the entire church was complete. The rector wrote to Emerson Peet that the vestry was making a mistake. Quote, "It seems clear to me that the vestry ought to surrender their contract and quit claim to us if they cannot pay at least the accruing interest." Negotiations between Mr. Morgan and Charles Bunn continued. At a vestry meeting on January 21st, 1895, it was moved to accept Mr. Bunn's proposal, but of the 7 men present, 5 declined to vote. In the end, the rector proposed on February 24th that a lot on the northeast corner of Portland and Kent be purchased for the sum of $8,200, leading the way to the church's present location and the construction of a guild house and chapel until the church could be completed. See page 47. The plans were by Cass Gilbert, the architect of the State Capitol building. The exterior and the interior of Cass Gilbert's temporary church are found on pages 48 and 49. On September 6, 1895, the rector read a statement to the vestry announcing two resignations, his own and that of Emil Oberhofer, the organist, each of whom had served the parish for about 3½ years. He explained that the reason for his resignation was to, quote, relieve the wardens and vestry of their obligations to him. See page 51. The vestry called the Reverend Dudley Ward Rhodes to become St. John's at the earliest possible moment, to serve as its 5th rector. He was a voluminous writer and popular lecturer. One of his books was titled Greed and Creed. A very large representation from the parish attended the annual meeting on April 20th, 1896, when receipts for the past year were reported as leaving the parish in the black by $97.01. In 1897, St. Margaret's Guild was established as St. John's social service organization and lasted for many productive decades, helping those in need, regardless of race or color. It assumed responsibility for families recommended by the organized charities of the city. They aimed to effect improvement in material and social welfare by visitation and by contributions in whatever form was needed for the comfort of the families, supplying them with food, fuel, clothing, and even money for rent in special cases. Early in 1901, the St. Margaret's Guild established an industrial service house at 96 Dale Street to be used as its headquarters and workrooms, where the women set up a work exchange with educational features for poor women. Washing and fine laundering were done on the premises, with the women soliciting laundry, especially the laundry from the bachelors of the city. Young boys, sons of the washwomen, called for the soiled clothes on Monday. The washing was done on Tuesdays and the ironing and mending on Wednesdays, with the clean clothes being returned either on Wednesday night or Thursday. See page 114. In 1987, the parish established a mission at Lillydale, a hamlet on the south side of the Mississippi River, about a mile west of the Omaha Railroad Bridge and 3 miles east of Mendota. The small congregation met temporarily in the public schoolhouse nearby. The rector and lay people from St. John's would travel there by boat during the warm months, but trudged across the frozen river during the winter. A church service took place on the 2nd Sunday of every month. And by May of 1910, the Lillydale Building Committee decided the work of building a chapel at once. Work on the chapel was suspended in 1918, but commenced again in 1919, with the chapel now completely equipped with the windows taken from St. John's. The St. Barnabas mission began to disappear from the vestry minutes and from St. John's Evangelist, and by the spring of 1925, the mission had ceased to exist. After only 4 years in the rectorship, and with the church in sound financial standing, the Reverend Dr. Rhodes submitted his letter of resignation for reasons of health. The vestry accepted his resignation with regret. See page 59. St. John's Search Committee for the 6th rector settled on the Reverend Theodore Sedgwick, founding rector of St. John's Church in Williamstown, Massachusetts, as their new priest. Mr. Sedgwick wrote to Senior Warden Victor A. Watkins that he would accept the vestry's call only if it would first relieve the parish of its $6,000 indebtedness. His starting salary would be $2,000 short of Mr. Morgan's ending salary. The parish succeeded in raising the funds shortly after he began his tenure. There were no outstanding debts, and all diocesan obligations had been paid. Out of a total of 412 sittings, 304 had been rented by the 220 families in the parish, leaving only 70 seats vacant. Page 61. Sedgwick noted that it was becoming more and more difficult to seat the congregation with sittings hard to come by. The altar rail could accommodate only 8 people at a time. I wanted to make a comment here. Do you know what the seating involved, with the parish seating involved? The parish, what's the word I want? The seats. Pardon? The pews were numbered, and they're still numbered. And if you look there, you'll see the numbers, one after another. And that's where the different families would sit after they paid their sitting. By September 1902, the parish had subscriptions of over $25,000 for a project that the vestry believed would cost them $40,000 and $45,000. Construction began. In 1902, the vestry voted to hire Minnesota architect Clarence Johnston to design the contemplated extension of the Guild House to reach Portland Avenue and to accommodate 800 sittings. See page 60. A close friend of Cass Gilbert, Johnston was becoming Minnesota's most prolific architect. The most sought-after residential architect for 2 generations of St. Paul's moneyed class, he designed 40 houses on Summit Avenue alone, considered the best preserved Victorian boulevard in America. I'm not sure whose idea that was. Early in 1903, the vestry decided to make a number of changes to help keep the cost down. For example, the tower was to be completed only as far as the deck level. In the end, the total cost came in at $65,000, well above the high-end estimate. As Mr. Sedgwick said, the unfinished tower would look like a turtle. It was decided to complete it for $5,500. During construction, it was necessary to gut the interior of Cass Gilbert's nave and chancel, with new chancel arches and columns being later added by Johnston. The new extension to the church is found on page 61. The Angel Baptistry was a gift of the Wilder family in memory of St. Paul businessman Amherst Wilder, and was installed in 1904. The Wilder family is shown on page 63. Mr. Wilder was baptized at St. John's when he was 66 and died several days later. 4 months into his rectorship, Mr. Sedgwick made his most important staff appointment when he hired as organist and choir master George H. Fairclough, who took charge on New Year's Day in 1901. In 1904, the vestry heard rumors that Mr. Sedgwick had received a call from a church in Englewood, New Jersey. In a letter to him, they declared their hope that he would remain at St. John's, expressing their, quote, full and unreserved appreciation and approval of the administration of his office and the honor, fidelity, and devotion which he has brought to the service of the parish. It is largely to his energy and zeal, which have never faltered, that we owe the new church building. A gratifying increase in the number of its members has crowned his work here, end of quote. But Mr. Sedgwick wrote a candid reply to the vestry. He declared, quote, "I have felt that the work has been on lines which received the assent of the vestry in a negative way. As long as it was successful, they had nothing against it. What I have felt I have lacked is not the words of commendation, but an active participation in the life and spiritual development of the parish by the vestry. It is for such reasons as I have stated that I question whether the vestry was in sympathy with my work as their rector," end of quote. In any case, Mr. Sedgwick declined the position in New Jersey to the certain relief of the vestry. The parish observed its 25th anniversary on the weekend December 7th to the 9th, 1906, and hoped to mark the occasion by making a reduction in the debt, which now stood at $10,600. The mortgage was finally paid off on December 24th, 1907, and Bishop Edsall consecrated the building on January 1st, 1908. Take a look at page 107. Parishioner Robert Binger had a long association with St. John's, beginning in his kindergarten year at Miss Goddard's school. He is shown here when the young school was located in the clubhouse. You can also see him on page 149 at his wedding and during a celebratory event for Eagle Scout Charlie Olson, who is seen in the front row far right. With his typical foresight and eager for the growth and prosperity of the beloved community, Mr. Sedgwick made the point that though St. John's was in touch with the young life of the community, it needed a building for community outreach. He wrote that while he wanted very much to start such a project, there were too many other concerns to be completed, and he felt it must be left to a future time. After a 5-month leave of absence in 1910, Mr. Sedgwick was feted at a parish reception where the congregation expressed their appreciation for his 10 years service in very clear terms. The parish women presented him with a purse of gold worth $550, and the vestry voted to erect a suitable rectory for him immediately, but it was never done. 1 month later, Sedgwick tendered his resignation in order to accept a call as rector of Calvary Church located on Gramercy Park in New York City. The vestry accepted his resignation with regret, remarking that it is to his untiring fidelity and personal effort that the growth and development of the parish are largely due. Sedgwick was followed in the rectorship by the Reverend Julius A. Schad, the rector of Grace Church in Kansas City, Missouri. Take a look at page 81. After his collegiate years, the Reverend Mr. Schad was engaged in YMCA work in Kentucky and Illinois and was president of the West Side Welfare Club, serving the civic and social needs of the people of Kansas City. His long and varied experience in social service and institutional work later proved valuable for his work at St. John's. At his first meeting with the vestry, the members proposed that 2 houses on Holly Avenue be considered as possible sites for a new rectory. But Mr. Schad, having been at the parish for little more than a week, presented an ambitious building proposal to the vestry, giving them an outline of his view of the special needs of the parish. He strongly advocated building a new parish house, equipping it for the amusement and entertainment of the young people of the parish. Such a clubhouse would also express the physical, social, and moral needs of many hundreds of young people of the Hill District, for which there was nothing whatever now being done. End of quote. He asserted that such a clubhouse had greater import than the securing of a rectory. In due course, the vestry agreed to contact a competent architect to advise them in the probable cost of a clubhouse, which is down, what street is that? Yes, Portland, which is now condominiums, I think. They decided on 2 lots situated at the southeast corner of Portland Avenue and Dale Street, just 1 block west of the church. The parish was thriving, and a friend of the parish offered to donate the lot upon which to erect the new parish building to the value of about $7,000, which could be large enough to serve the dual purpose of clubhouse and rectory. The new rector was apparently winning the confidence of his parishioners, and the vestry accepted the offer. But there was no movement toward a parish rectory. That's all I have for this morning. So if we have time, we do have a little time for your questions or observations. Yes.
Did you hear that, Jim? The Fairclaw hire, and you said it was one of the most important hires, for the church, Fairclaw, the music director.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that?
George Fairclaw was an important figure in the Twin Cities. He was the founder of the Twin Cities chapter of the Organist Guild. He was also on the faculty of the University of Minnesota. He ran the music program here for many years. I forget how many exactly, 42, I think. And he did a lot for this parish. He had a boys choir of anywhere from 20 to 60. And he established a women's choir. He established a girls' choir. He established camps in the north of here. They used different camps over different years. But as many as 50 boys would go to that summer camp. They could take the train up to one of the places where the camps were being held. He was greatly recognized as an important feature in the Twin Cities area. Do you have anything else? Okay. Other observations or questions?
Yes, Barbara.
I just want to say that I can't believe we have this book for this parish. It's so scholarly, it's so beautifully written. And as you highlight some of the details, there's even more in here than I thought. So I just think it's just a fabulous thing that we have.
Thank you. I enjoyed writing it. It took several years, and we had a committee that was just incredible. Who was on the committee? Betty Myers, Jim Johnson, Alden Drew, and Fred Myers. Now we've lost 2 of those people. I didn't mention Dusty Myers and Patricia McDonald, but we lost Patricia McDonald during the process of the publishing, and we lost Fred Myers during the writing of the book. The archives here at St. John's are incredible. In fact, most of what I've written is in those two volumes, the vestry minutes and the parish newsletter. That's where most of this material comes from. There are many photographs there. Many of those come in the book. They show up in the book. It took some juggling to be able to get this presentation in logical order. In fact, it sort of drove me crazy. But that was the main, those were the main sources of the book. Yes? I'm sorry.
Did you have records like city records or for like the establishment of the church and the legal structure?
The city, the library downtown, I forget what it's called.
The Hill Reference Library.
Yes.
Mhm.
I forget what it's called, but it had a number of things about the architecture of this building and the library at the city of St. Paul Library. I found some interesting things in that library. But yes, I did use those places. And also the main one I used was the library at the, what is that called? Pardon?
The Historical Society?
The Historical Society, yes. There's quite a bit there. A number of photos and not so much the history of St. John's, but a lot of photographs that show up in the book.
Mark McEnroy.
Period of St. John's history. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about what you see as the biggest challenges that St. John's encountered and any key decisions or key factors that led to St. John's thriving.
I think one of the most interesting aspects of St. John's history is the attempt to move to Summit Avenue. I find that very interesting. And most of the behind the scenes maneuvering doesn't appear here or in the book because it wasn't written down. There's nothing in the archives that say very much at all about the building of the church. There was an architect named Ralph Adams Cram who built the church for House of Hope. He was the architect for that building. He was asked to produce some plans for this building. And his name is hardly mentioned in the archives. I'm not too sure why, it's not very clear. In fact, it's not clear who contacted him, but I think it would have been an incredible move if Ralph Adams Cram could have been the designer of this church. He built any number of collegiate buildings and other churches, Princeton University, St. John the Divine in New York. He was involved in the plans for that building. But after the church went up, after the extension went up, he was hired to design I can't think of them. The lights from the window, from the,
Clear story?
pardon?
The clear story, maybe?
Not the clear story, the chandeliers.
Oh.
The chandeliers, sorry. And they're elegant. They're really elegant. They're an improvement over what was there. You can see both groups of chandeliers you can see in various parts of the book. So I found it interesting. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Oh, the Holly.
I'm curious, there's lots of ways one can organize history, and you have put it in each chapter is about a different rector, right? So we march through all of those folks and the history unfolds underneath them. Could you just say something about how you chose to organize all of the material that you had?
Well, it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy because in the parish records and in the evangelists, there were many irregular points in the chronology. So there would be something on page 10 for 1940 and something on page 11 for 1941, for instance. So it was tricky. It was tricky to get them in that order. Yeah, I'm not sure what else to say. It was tricky. It was tricky. Anything else? Well, thank you very much. Is there another question?
Another question? I have one, in speaking of the architects, do you know if there's any other buildings in the St. Paul where Gilbert, and Clarence Johnston were both involved? I mean, I think this is a very unique part of this building, that it actually involves both St. Paul's architects.
Right.
Is there another example of that?
There's not one that I know about. Yes? Hmm.
So the two.
Hmm.
Right next to the church.
Mhm.
It's right next to it.
And actually, there are photographs that report the progress and show the original drawings, which are considerably larger than it is right now. So it wasn't all done as drawn. And it's 125. It was built in 1895.
Okay.
So the 125th anniversary was celebrated. Well,
It was a memorial church.
Yes,
yes.
yes.
Yes, Mrs. gave $25,000 in memory of her husband. He was from New York.
That's right.
She gave $25,000 it would have been 1890s,
Right.
given in his memory. And there are Tiffany windows, several Tiffany, one over the altar and a couple.
Thank you very much.
Well, and the other thing I was relieved of, Jim, is that the idea of a contentious vestry meeting is in our history. It's in our DNA.
I wanted you to hear about that. I think St. John's parish structure and the way the community is organized is really wonderful. And this clearly shows that there were problems with individual men providing major contributions toward the parish house and the church. It was clear they came to blows over things. Quite interesting. St. Margaret's Guild.
The guild at St. Margaret's, a very early guild to establish in the history of the church.
I wanted that in here also, because I think St. John's has a bad history in terms of its early history. And there was certainly good evidence of outreach from St. John's.
Thank you, women.
Thank you, women.
Yeah.
Thank you, women. Yes. So Jim will be back next week for the next 3 weeks. And so we're very excited. I would just like to make sure that we thank Jim with a round of applause. Thank you, Jim. This is tremendous. And transition to our service, I'd just like to close in a very short prayer. Let us pray. O Master, let us walk in your company, hearing your words, seeing your deeds, feeling your love, and having walked with you along the road of life, may we walk with others in your name. Amen.